tenants of the entire community. And that stayed the same with our revised SP proposal. From a retail standpoint, today you have about 15 options open that equals around 200,000 square feet. Under MUL, that could be obviously vastly more. It's about 460,000. And then our original SP proposal, we were considering 20 different options, 60,000 square feet, and based on the immense feedback that we received throughout the community meetings.
The audio is not working on YouTube? It's okay, great, thank you.
Yeah. And so with all the feedback that we received, we increased the retail by 33% for a total of 80,000 square feet, and committing to, at a bare minimum, 30 distinct retail options. Under residential, no, of course, there is no residential today on the site, but the base zoning does allow for residential. We obviously are proposing residential in both the original SP proposal and today's. Something that's come up a couple of times are short-term rentals. So currently today you can do short-term rentals on site, and the base zoning there does allow for it. Because we are going through an SP process, and it's very clear that the councilwoman, the community, they are not fans of short-term rentals. We are committing to no short-term rentals on the site. And then maximum height, today you're allowed to go 345 feet up. And we originally proposed at the tallest building 212 feet. And then with the revised proposal, our tallest building is now 149 feet. Parking today, 664 spaces. That is what we were proposing in the original SP. And today we are at least going to have 950 spaces. And to be clear, we will always meet Metro Code at a bare minimum, if not exceed what Metro Code requires. Oop, go back. Okay, just so everyone orients themselves, to the east, there's White Bridge. To the south, Harding Pike. The residential component of the development is sort of towards the back, towards the north. The retail to the south of that. Our unit mix is going to be about 287 apartments, 101 condos, 78 hotel keys. We originally proposed 120, and we've since brought that down again through a lot of the feedback that we received to 78 keys, and then the retail and parking as I just went through. And with that, I'm going to pass it on over to Brian Phelps with Hawkins Partners, and he's going to give you a short little presentation.
Thank you, Pablo. My name is Brian Phelps. I'm a senior partner at Hawkins Partners. I've been there since 1998 and been a landscape architect since 2000. So I've been practicing there for a while now. And we have been around in Nashville, based in Nashville, since 1986. Some of the projects I know I've mentioned in previous presentations that I was fortunate enough to be involved in the Richland Creek Greenway. And it was really a tremendous experience to appreciate the Richland Creek watershed and just how beautiful the creek is. Additionally, another notable project you may be familiar with is the Riverfront Park and Ascend Amphitheater, where we transformed the thermal site along the river. Along with that. So as I was preparing for today, I really started reflecting on this project in the last two meetings that we've had, and it really reinforced why I wanted to be a landscape architect. It isn't every day that you have an opportunity to make such a huge impact on a watershed in the environmental impact on a site. And then also just being able to create a series of places that can bring a community together and a place for fellowship. And then in addition to that, working with a developer, that is committed to the power of place and bringing people together and having the dedication to kind of work through the difficulties of all this, seeing it through and creating it at a quality level for Nashville. So throughout my career, I've also, take the responsibility very seriously of that what is developed and what we design lasts for years, decades. Our hope is that it's beloved places that last for a very long time. And this site is a good example of just seeing how long a site will, what we decide to build in the 60s is still here with us today. So it really hits home like how important that is. And it's really surprising what we allowed back then. I had no idea that these buildings, as much as I've been over here going to the Kroger or to the wine store or Starbucks, that it was built over the creek. And really, it was just crazy that we would allow something like this that would back then to do that. It's not allowed today, and this project is removing a number of those structures. If you go to the next slide, or I guess I've got the. Oh. So this is some examples of what's underneath there. If you haven't been underneath there from one of the first meetings, I understand that a lot of people have been down here more than during their younger years. But the top one and the one to the left showing just what the creek looks like underneath here. And it really just prevents any vegetation and the thermal aspects that make for a healthy ecosystem that these structures prevent. And you can see just upstream the Richland Creek, just the beauty. I mean, when I was on, using the Richland Creek Greenway, it's just amazing that there's so many parts that just feel like you're not even within the city. And this segment is no exception as you look to beyond this site. Oh, I keep hitting the wrong one. So this is as Pablo was explaining, this is the site plan, and the path in yellow and pink are the greenway paths. They account for nearly just over 2,000 linear feet of greenway, all of which is a minimum of 14 feet wide. The pathway in yellow is a pathway that is never to be closed. It is always open. 24/7, 365 days a year. And the pink areas are similar to like you would have in parks where you could close it for an event of some sort as part of that. We've also, as you at the far left, looking at what we call Platform Park, where we're creating this terminus park at the end of the greenway that really provides a unique opportunity to maintain pieces of the structure that are out there. And we're removing over 80% of what's there, but trying to reuse some of those areas to provide, whether it's educational opportunities, fitness, gatherings, or just simply just enjoying sitting near the creek. But it really just provides a really unique vantage point that we really find it to be important, and also just providing that terminus to the project. Oh, I keep in the wrong one. So the site itself, I mean, just in comparison to what's out there, is that we are, as a part of these improvements, reshaping the creek, removing the structures, cutting the columns out down to the bases, so we don't disturb as much of the ecosystem that is remaining there, but then reshaping that riverbank and replanting that with native species and trees. But when you look at how much of that green space in comparison what's there, I mean, we're increasing it by 277% from what is there today. And that is only just the green space itself. It does not count all of the trees that we're planting, well over 250 trees of significant size that would be planted, along with various plantings along the riverbank. And then when you account for the public spaces and the open space where we have accessibility for plazas, sidewalks, and other places for people to enjoy, it accounts for 60% of the site. So it's a significant amount of open space in comparison. I mean, it's 370% more open space than what is there today as a part of that site. If I hit the right one eventually. But just, you know, pictures do speak 1,000 words, and just seeing the before and afters really have, for us, has been a really big impact when we've been out there and when we walked it with various people on site, just seeing like just what the experience there along the creek is today. It right now is being used as service and loading and dumpsters access. I mean, all of that has a significant impact on the creek, where garbage gets as much as the tenants do the best job they can to keep it cleaned up. I mean, there's always inevitably things are getting into the creek, which all eventually goes downstream. But by changing all of these, adding this landscape and improvements along here and reshaping this, it begins to really slow down the water. It becomes absorbs the stormwater. So it slows down for the amount of water entering the creek. It cleans the water as a part of that. So it's just a significant difference from what is there today. So I'll leave it at that and turn it over to John Gore to talk about stormwater.
Great. Thank you, Brian. Appreciate the chance to be here today. My name is John Gore. I'm with Barge Civil Associates. I'm a civil engineer. Been working in this field about 25 years. And we've also had the opportunity to work on a lot of great projects in Nashville, and excited to talk to you about this project. As you can imagine, this is a great opportunity. As Brian said, the regulations that are in place today, none of these regulations were really in place when this existing project was developed. So, you know, when you think about all the fundamental rules that have to be followed when new development happens, the existing project didn't really follow any of them. So it's a huge chance to make a big improvement. But we're talking about a lot of technical terms, so I thought we'd just start with some definitions. We're going to talk about floodplains and floodways, and just wanted to kind of set the table with some definitions about what those are. 100-year floodplain is a flood event with a 1% chance of happening in any given year. So the term 100-year floodplain is sometimes misleading because it maybe makes somebody think that scientifically somebody's figured out that this is a flood that's only going to happen once every 100 years, but it's could happen more than once in 100 years. And as we're seeing, you know, rain is changing, climate's changing, storms are changing. So we have the expectation that a storm like this could happen more than once every 100 years. 10-year floodplain is just a lower level of floodplain, and that's an event that has a 10% chance of happening in a given year. And then the floodplain elevation, of course, is just the water surface elevation. Those are areas that would be inundated in a flood event. This map shows kind of the existing red outlines of the buildings that are there. You see the Kroger on the left, you see kind of the L-shaped parking garage, and then on the right, you see the strip center that's there. The areas that you're seeing, the darker area is what we call the floodway. There's kind of a long technical definition for the floodway, but essentially the floodway is the higher moving water. This is where the majority of the water is conveyed. And I think everybody knows, but what you've got is a confluence of Sugar Tree Creek coming under Harding Road, and then you've got Richland Creek coming from the left. These two streams come together and then proceed as Richland Creek towards the golf course. It's the large watershed. It's about 18 square miles. And it's also got a lot of topographical change. So what that affects is kind of how quickly it floods. What we see sometimes is kind of in a flatter basin, you have a rain event and you got kind of a longer time for a flood event to occur. What you see in a basin with so much topographical change is that a flood event can happen very quickly. But that 18 square miles, I think a lot of people, you know, from around here can envision that goes to Green Hills, where you see Sugar Tree Creek go past the YMCA. It goes up towards 9 Mill Hill, and all this area kind of comes together at this point. The lighter blue that you see is the floodplain that we talk about. That's kind of the extensive areas that would be inundated in a 100-year flood event. And then the two kind of narrower lines, those are the basis of metro regulations we call buffer regulations. And so regulations that are in place now that weren't in place when this was developed require development to stay off of a creek. So the darker line from the black to the blue is what we said is the floodway limits. There's a 50-foot, what we call a zone 1 buffer, which is a pretty strict area that's not to be disturbed. And then there's a second buffer that's 25 feet, we call zone 2 buffer, that does allow some disturbance, but still wants to be protected and does not allow, in new development, does not allow buildings and parking and other impervious area inside of the buffer. There are exceptions for greenways and parks and things like that, but you don't want any normal impervious area inside that buffer. So this is a cross section that I think really helps kind of show the conditions that's out there. This is kind of looking downstream. Of course, Richland Creek's in the bottom in blue, and you see the parking garage. Again, this is kind of unheard of today to build a parking structure over a creek like this. But as you saw from the pictures that Brian went through, the parking garage kind of goes out over the creek, and then the kind of back of house area that Brian was showing between the strip center. So the building on the right is the existing commercial center. Where you see kind of Smoothie King and Starbucks and everything. The red is the lower level. That's where like Belle Meade Wine and Spirits are. And you can see Belle Meade Wine and Spirits is about 6 or 8 feet below the 100-year floodplain. The main buildings that are up a little bit higher, up one level, are about 2 feet above the floodplain. But this kind of shows the condition that was originally built. This slide helps shows what we're trying to accomplish with this redevelopment. We are trying to bring the buildings away from the floodplain, and we are also trying to raise them. This section shows the creek with the parking garage removed, and then it shows kind of the taller gray area is the main finished floor in the residential tower. That finished floor right now, our design places that at 472. I'm going through a lot of these elevations. I also have printouts of these slides. So after this, if you'd rather come up and kind of look in detail, I'd be glad to talk about it with you. But the main kind of residential area and commercial area, we're putting at 472. So that's about 2 feet above the main area where Starbucks and Smoothie King and everything are. And then what you're seeing below that is the parking garage that we're putting at 462, which is still 6 feet above the lower level where Belle Meade Wine and Spirits are. So again, we're kind of working on pulling everything further away from the floodplain and then also raising it. So what you're seeing, kind of the vertical sections that call out the floodway, then you've got this 50-foot first buffer, 25-foot second buffer. So that's 75 feet. So we're really moving all this about a total of 100 feet away from the creek to kind of help accomplish these goals. And this is a slide that just kind of shows both on top of each other. You can see, like I say, the existing parking garage over the creek and the proposed buildings on the right. And again, this is kind of a cross section through the site. That red line in the top left corner shows the cross section, kind of shows where this takes place. This is kind of one of our worst case parts of the site. We're still making a lot of improvements, but as you head west, it just kind of gets better and better because the floodplain and the flood elevations are dropping as the creek flows downstream. So this is kind of a cross section. We cut it kind of the toughest section. And this is a summary just of some of the permitting processes. There's been a lot of questions about, how do we make sure that all these regulations are followed? How do we make sure that everything's built in accordance with these new regulations? So this is kind of a flow chart that talks through the process that this project will have to go through to get approval and then get constructed. On the left is where we are right now with the preliminary rezoning process that we're working through. And then once we get through that process, there's really kind of 4 concurrent processes that the team will have to work through to get towards a building permit stage. The first at the top, anytime you alter a stream bank or work within the floodway, there's 2 permits packages that go in. They're kind of go in concurrently. One goes to the Corps of Engineers. It's called a nationwide permit, and one goes to TDEC. It's called an ARAP permit. But those are permits that the team has to prepare, kind of show how they're going to physically alter the bank and make these improvements. And then that gets into a lot of stabilization, trees, how the bank is kind of being laid back. If you saw those pictures Brian showed right now, what you've got is a lot of vertical walls kind of right at the creek bank. So as we remove those structures and kind of lay back the creek bank, that's the sort of thing that's going to be in those permits. The second package is called a no-rise analysis or a CLOMAR. CLOMAR stands for Conditional Letter of Map Revision. So that's a package that goes to Metro Water Services first for review, and then goes to TEMA and FEMA. So what we do in that case is we actually get the model that FEMA uses. U.S. Corps of Engineers prepares those hydraulic models. So we actually get those models that has a baseline of the water elevation now. We kind of run back through those models. In this case, it's going to show removing all these structures, kind of laying back the creek bank. Then we have to analyze the models that show what the creek will be doing after all these improvements are made. And then that way the Corps can kind of prepare those models and kind of compare and make sure that they feel like it's also an improvement. And then kind of the reference to map revision, then what they do is after the project's finished, every 10 or 15 years or so, FEMA kind of reissues the flood maps. And so what they will eventually do is when they reissue flood maps, they will issue them and it will show this new floodplain that's a result of the stream bank improvements. The The third step is a stream bank stabilization plan that has to go to a committee called the Stormwater Management Committee. That's a committee in Nashville with people appointed by the mayor. And that's essentially our buffer restoration plan. That's going to show all the trees. It's going to show all the structures removed. It's going to show the greenway. And that's a plan that goes to that committee for approval. And any work inside the floodway has to go to that committee, whether you're making improvements or you're asking permission to encroach into the floodway. That package has to go and get approved at that committee. And then the last step is our permitting with Metro Water Services. There's one analysis called a floodplain cut and fill. That's the floodplain is essentially, obviously storage for all this water that's trying to get through an rain event. So there's an analysis we have to do to make sure that we don't fill or take away from that storage. And then flood proofing plan. So if there's any areas of our parking garage or other parts of the structure that need flood proofing, that's a package that goes in. We show Metro Water Services how we're going to accomplish that. And then that gets kind of all sent to Metro Water Services as part of a grading permit review. And so at kind of the final step, they are going to make sure that we've gotten these four main permits approved. And then we show up kind of at the very end, there's a process called a final SP. That's a package that goes to planning, and then a grading permit that goes to Metro Water Services. And it's kind of just a check and balance to make sure that all this happens. And then just real quickly on the back end, there's also a process where after this project's built, we do what's called an as-built submittal and goes through and documents all the floodproofing, documents all the cut and fill, documents all the buffer restoration, and everything that the permits said would happen, and make sure that they did happen, so that everybody can be sure that it's going to function as it was designed. Pass it back to Papa.
Thanks, everyone. And I do want to introduce David Jackson, who can answer questions related to the environment. He's our environmentalist. And Wade Hutchinson, who is our blasting expert as well, in case anyone has questions. But with that, Councilwoman, can we?
Yeah. So what we're going to do is we've got 2 mics here rather than having to pass around and go back and forth. So if y'all have questions on the stormwater aspect, environmental power, the creek and things like that, come on up to the mics and we'll start answering those questions. But Tom, do you mind coming up for a second? So I actually was going to ask Tom that flow chart that y'all just showed that, no offense, I found incredibly boring but accurate. Like, I'm kind of like, y'all need to present that to council as our orientation. Tom Palco, like I introduced before, he is the assistant director at Metro Stormwater. But earlier, when I was making sure I got his title right, I was like, I'm sure the official title is not Stormwater Hero. He is my personal Stormwater Hero. Whenever I have stormwater issues, I send them to Tom, and he always is very to be stormwater, very cut and dry, very dry with his answers and very accurate. And so I appreciate that. And so I'm just going to call them out on that process. Tom, is that correct? Is that how y'all do? Because that was the question I really wanted you here for, is to say, how does development go through the stormwater process and get approved like this?
Yeah, so again, as a panel up here, everything that you heard is exactly what happens. And we've been working with John Gore and others up here for many years. I'm Tom Palco. I'm a civil engineer. I've been with Metro Water Services. I've been with Metro for since 37 years. I've been here since 1985. And so this, again, like Brian said, this is a kind of a once in a lifetime opportunity to fix what happened on the site years ago, that, again, none of this would have been able to be built today the way it is. And so, like we also said, this is a pretty complicated site from a stormwater standpoint, from a stormwater modeling standpoint. You have 2 creeks coming together underneath the building, and everything that John said as far as the process goes. There's lots of players involved. We've already had a meeting with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and the gentleman that does those models. He's already pretty excited about this, and we've already talked about what would go into this model. And one thing that we require when we look at these models is that there's a thing called a no rise. We don't want someone to do a project that's going to inadvertently or whatever make things worse on some of the property owners. So part of that no-rise process is looking at the existing models, the existing conditions, and putting all the proposed improvements into it and see what happens. And in this case here, all we're doing is pulling stuff out, pulling stuff away from the creek, daylighting the creek. So the no-rise process is going to be fairly simple. And again, there's some things I can do as far as this floodway line that goes through. That can be better defined now once we do this project, because right now that line kind of goes through the building underneath the building. You've got a railroad track on the back, so it's pretty complicated. So from our standpoint, there's really nothing else I could ask for on the site. I mean, as far as what they're doing is daylight the stream and all the other improvements. And so, like John said, there are multiple steps that have to go through. And the key is that we're abiding by that floodway. We're staying out of the floodway, because if you do things in a floodway, you start making the model do crazy things somewhere else. And as John said about those buffers, the one buffer, you can do some work in there, but that's why we got to go to the Stormwater Committee. And again, the committee is appointed by the mayor, and they're very professional. They look at these sites and they take everybody's considerations into play and make the decisions. And with this, again, we're talking about a buffer restoration plan, because again, we're not putting hard surfaces into the buffer. We want to take out, you saw what the stream looked like underneath the buildings. We're going to create a stream back through this process. But again, due to the fact that they're in that area, that close to the stream, they do have to get the variance to do that. So, sister, if I was grading John, I would have given him an A+ on his, so he did good there. So trying to put in a good word for you, John.
Tom, through these modelings, one of the questions and concerns that has come in a lot is that there could be flooding into the parking garages that they have proposed and that they're planning. Is that something, like, through the modeling, if y'all did the calculations and there's the chance that people would be caught in these parking garages or things like that, is that something you would approve, or is it something you would send back for them to recalculate?
Are you flood proofing those lower areas in the garage, or how are you doing that?
Yeah, so we've got Sure. Maybe we'll go back to the site plan. That might help. So we got 3 access points into the garage. We've got one to the west that's kind of the right in, right out, and one in the middle that's where the existing signal is, and one to the east, kind of near Whitebridge Road. So our one that we're talking about here is to the west, where you see the right in, right out. And so that is the entrance that's got to be flood proofed. When we think about a garage that's below the floodplain, there's really like 3 ways that water could get into it. One would be from a groundwater situation. If you've ever been to, like, where the Harris Teeter garage is, and you can kind of hear groundwater in that garage. I mean, it's not flooding, but water's kind of working its way into the foundations. So that's kind of a flood proofing exercise with foundation drains and that sort of thing to protect the garage. But the main thing we're talking about is if there is a flood event, that existing driveway where it hits Harding is about 3 feet below the floodplain. So the water elevation would be about 3 feet high. So there's our flood doors and other kind of mechanical devices that we have to design and get approved by Metro Water Services that could be raised in a flood event. And again, so the good thing about this is we've got 2 other entrances. So if that flood door had to be raised on the western side, that anybody whose car, first of all, it would keep the garage from flooding. But second of all, you've got 2 other ways outside of the garage.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then, so how are you, I know you said cut and fill. How are you raising up? So, like, currently, like when you showed where the liquor store currently is, and then you're showing above that, what cut and fill are you doing there or across the site? And does that cut and fill and that material get approved by Metro?
Yes. The main material that's coming out, what we call cut, is actually just the structure itself. Maybe go to the next one that's got both. So the kind of material where you think about, like, where Belle Meade Wine and Spirits are, where the garage is, that's all material that somebody built into the floodplain to build the garage, to build these structures. So the first thing is actually a lot easier than most jobs. Most jobs, you're pushing into the floodplain, and then you're trying to find somewhere else to cut out to compensate it so that it all balances out. This job, luckily, we have a whole big amount of material to remove day one. So it's really just a documentation of that. But the parking garage and the lower level of the retail is all currently fill in the floodplain that's going to be taken out and then, like I say, shifted away from the building.
Okay. And so, Tom, I've got a few questions for you, and then I'll let you go sit down. So some of y'all may know I live downstream from here. Obviously, I'm Whitebridge and Charlotte, and I have a creek through my backyard. I've seen my creek rise from development and back up because there's more going into the creek. And in fact, we've had conversations about why I don't have, I think in 15, 17 years I've lived there, I've had like 1 crawfish that I found. And so I'm sure in this creek, there's a lot more aquatic life. My brother swears that he saw an alligator snapping turtle. We'll take that with a grain of salt. Tell me about how does Metro evaluate and check on what critters are there, making sure those critters are not disturbed during, I'm sure there's a more technical term than critter, not disturbed during construction and are living more healthy afterwards.
Yeah, so the slide that had the nice flow chart that you left, that's going to be handled by the state of Tennessee. Locally, we don't look at that. We look at the other aspects of the site engineering or whatever, but the environmental aspects of it, that's why it's also got to go through TDEC to do that, Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation, and those are the things that they'll look at.
I want to make sure my crawfish were safe. Uh, Yeah, David, do you want to speak to that as well? And then if y'all, that was my kind of last on these questions. If y'all have stormwater creek questions, please come up to the mics and then we'll just go back and forth.
I'm David Jackson with Davy Resource Group, and we've recently been retained by AJ Capital to help with some of the questions like yours, Councilwoman Murphy. TDEC has a really robust permitting program that John alluded to, the Aquatic Resource Alteration Permit Program that protects water quality, but also any critters, as you put it, that may be listed species or species of concern or otherwise have some sensitivity about them. And so any of the activities that have been described here will have to go through TDEC. And as I said, that's a pretty robust program. I would also mention that even though it's not necessarily a water quality set of regulations, there's stormwater regulations, but all of the water regulations that are overseen by the committee that Tom mentioned, those are getting at water quality. So even though Metro doesn't give you a permit per se, it's under the purview of the Stormwater Committee, and that's if I may say so, a tough crowd.
And I'm sorry, I had one more question. I believe, because I know in other communities that have gone through this, the state for your ARAP permit and things like that, there is a comment period. Is that correct? That TDEC goes through back and forth?
There is both our water quality statute and our regulations require a public notice, and anyone who asks for a hearing, typically TDEC will reward them with having a public hearing, and then there's a comment period as well. So it's a very public process.
Okay, so we could have comments added. So we have an opportunity then to do that, and at the Stormwater Committee, I know because I've been there too. So I know at the Stormwater Committee as well. So let's take environmental and water questions.
Paula Van Slyke, is this working? I live on Hampton Avenue. Excuse me, I have two questions. On the western parking garage, the right in, right out, how many stories is it? And I'm assuming blasting will be involved in creating it. My second question, I think, is for Hawkins. When you said that the greenways will never be closed, my question is, who's going to own the land? There was discussion in the first meeting I went to in January that you would have a master HOA development. I'm a commercial real estate attorney, by the way. That you would have a master development. And in my experience representing developers, it's really important who is going to own that land after the development, whether it can be closed off or not. So I'm curious as to how you're going to guarantee legally that Riverwalk area, Creek Walk, will always be open to the public. And then the question about maybe for Mr. Gore about the parking garage. Thank you.
Hi, Paula. Thank you. Thank you for the question. And just so everybody knows, I'm going to get a little repetitive, and I'm going to repeat the question just so that people watching at home also have an opportunity to listen in. So the first question is around the parking garage and whether or not there's going to be blasting. So the answer is yes, absolutely. We will need to blast, but I know that Wade can fill you in on the more technical aspect of what that process is going to look like. Wade? It is one level.
To clarify, it's one level on the western side to your question. Right.
I'm Wade Hutchison, president of VCE. Just to give you a little background about our company, we're established here in the Nashville area in 1975, and we've worked on numerous projects that have similar exposures as are indicated on this particular project. As far as the blasting goes, the approach to this project would be one for similar projects with urban exposures, and that before the blasting occurs, there'll be documentation of the condition of the structures and the residences that are in the pre-blast zone area. State typically requires 300 feet for that, but this project is expanding that distance as similar projects in high-density urban areas in Nashville, say Green Hills, or other projects in the downtown area and so forth. And so that particular measure of care will take place before the blasting starts. Containment of the site techniques will be used to control the blasting and contain it to the actual site to limit the transmissibility of vibrations to the neighboring residences. And so that process will bring extra measures of care and control to the blasting process. If there are concerns that are raised during that process, one of the techniques that will be used throughout the course of that will be multi-location seismographs to document the vibration and the air concussion associated with the blasting. And then in addition to that, portable equipment will be used to address any specific concerns that should arise during the course of the blasting on the project. And if there are any concerns about the effects of that blasting, those will be responded to in a very timely fashion and evaluated. And that gives me a thumbnail sketch of what's planned for the blasting on the project.
Yeah, I think so. That was great, Wade. And then for the second question, I'd almost suggest looking at this as a public-private partnership where AJ is going to develop the creek walk, but we're going to maintain it. This is not going to take any sort of local dollars. This is not going to be any sort of situation where we're finding ourselves that the creek walk or the waterway or anything like that falls into disrepair. That's an investment that we're going to be taking on ourselves, and that we're committing to maintaining ourselves for whatever time that is, right?
And so also in the legislation, if it gets to that level, we can evaluate and develop deed restrictions and evaluate and get from Nashville Greenways the standard that Nashville Greenways, the Greenways Department expects it to be kept to, and will require them to keep it to the Metro Greenways standard or higher. I would imagine with this type of development, they would keep it a little bit higher. They have a little bit more resources and a timely repair than some of us on our greenways. But that is something that I will be requiring as well with, as he spoke about blasting, that expanded range. That's just not something they're going to say. That will be something that will be in writing and attached to any legislation that moves forward.
Yeah, Brian, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I'd just like to. Yeah, I'd just like to add a little bit more about the kind of how that's being codified is, it'll be within a greenway easement, and it will be a legal document with Metro, and it will go through Greenways Commission, the Parks Board, and then ultimately council to final approval for the acceptance of that. And I will tell you from projects that I've been working on, that Metro Greenways will require that there will be a way to get through 24/7. I mean, it is one of the very first things they ask for. So that is a part of that legalized agreement with Metro. And that legalized agreement on top of that says the developer is building it and the developer is maintaining it, as everyone said, to the standards that they believe that should be met by Metro. So.
Steve Ryder, I just wanted to say, I think the point is access. That's what we're talking about. And access is restricted in many greenways. Over by the Sound Stadium, you can't go there all the time. Over by Ascend Amphitheater, you can't go there all the time. So to say, oh, the Greenways has this policy and everybody's open all 24/7, I'm sorry, sir, that's not true. So it's just not. My second question is regards to The creek, you said that you have to go through Army Corps of Engineers. So if you're going through the Army Corps of Engineers, that means you're probably going to change the flow of the water somehow, because that's the reason you go for an Army Corps of Engineers permit. Am I correct on that, or am I wrong? And I'll
Hold
sit
on,
down and
before
hear
you
your
get to
answer.
the Army Corps of Engineers, because it's much more intense than I'll answer. Yes, it is extremely disappointing what previous administrations have agreed to with the Sound Stadium and Ascend Amphitheater. It's something that Council Lady Angie Henderson and I have been furious over. I hear it from my friends who can still run and bike and things like that. And that is why, if this is going to move forward, I will make sure that it is done right, where we, the people, have access to it, and it is not shut down by the way Live Nation does that, or the way the Sounds do that. And that is nothing against Live Nation or the Sounds. I'll still go to games and be a fan. But this is different. Those are different ones, and this is one that I'm going to make sure that it is done right. And I think Nashville has learned from those past mistakes.
And
Go
I
ahead.
will add, those are metro projects that we're speaking of. And I will say that we are working on the Sounds, the development right next to the Sounds by Portman, who has, because of this problem, they are currently building a new segment of the Sounds, or the Riverfront Greenway, to make that connection so that it can always be maintained and be open. That has been always a common problem since it's been open, and it is being solved, and it's being solved by a developer who is building right next to that. Second, the part of this all really, I mean, those two projects that were mentioned are one of the reasons it's an extremely sensitive topic to Metro Greenways. They never again want to be in that position, and they never want that to happen again. So it will be codified within the agreements, but you know, and I hope that Ascend Amphitheater is solved. I think that that's been a constant problem since it's open, and the intent was that it was open 24/7. So
the other question was Army Corps of Engineers.
Sure. I would say you're 100% correct. That is why we have to go to the Army Corps Engineers, because we are making a change, but we feel like we're making a change for the better. Usually when they see permits, people are trying to get permission to, put things in the floodway or restrict the flow. This is a situation where we're removing obstruction. So that's why we have to go there. But I believe they will be, happy about what we're doing, and they will certainly review the permits like they would. But again, it's rare to be able to go to the Army Corps and show them that you're making a situation better.
Hi, my name's Edie. Oh, okay. My name's Edie Orr, and I live over in the West Nashville, Belle Meade side. I have two questions about this. I find it curious, with all the effort that you all have done in the daylighting and all the emphasis on the creek, the blasting that is going to take place and such. Why are you leaving the pillars of the parking area? Why? What does that actually solve, unless it saves your company money? I mean, if you're really going to clean this whole thing up, why aren't you taking all of the concrete out when you're doing this? That's the starter with this. Here's the other thing. This says here, AJ Capital is not restoring the creek. Many people think you are. Such a goodwill effort, but you aren't. It says what you're doing is daylighting the creek, but not completely. Now, you're going to call this a nice place to do aerobics, yoga, or walk around with a cocktail, but you're cutting short on cleaning out all that shouldn't have been allowed when this was built. So it says, you're just going to daylight the creek and adding a tree buffer. So this is my question then. Any developer, not just AJ Capital, is this right? Under the current zoning, will have to daylight the creek. Is that right? Is that, Kathleen? Isn't that right?
Like if they're building by right?
Yeah, so again, the idea that we've talked about earlier, that, when this thing is built, it could not be built today. A project that the way it exists today, it could not be built, because you would not be able to build buildings over the stream with a FEMA, flood study on it.
Exactly. So just
I'm sorry, wait. So if if this sold to just
another developer,
someone else,
yes,
they could continue to use the buildings on site. So it could continue to operate the way that it is. So I guess for more clarity, I mean, if somebody is just doing it by right, would they still have to do all of the things that AJ is presenting?
Sure, any kind of redevelopment, if it's a significant redevelopment, which anything would be to this nature, they would have to meet they meet the current regulations. And there is a provision in Metro and in FEMA that we've adopted in locally. When we had the May 2010 flood and every flood after that, if you have a building that's damaged, if that building is damaged by more than 50%, then you cannot restore it the way it was if the floor elevation is not right and if it's in the floodway. So these buildings we don't know that there's been, that kind of damage on these particular buildings, but yeah, anybody touching this site to significant redevelopment would have to do the same things.
So clearly that's my point, is that I feel like that we're somewhat being told that you're the fairy godfather that's going to roll in here and do what no other developer would either be required or would be willing to do. That's not actually accurate. We are not against daylighting the creek. I don't think anyone would be against anything that will preserve the creek. We are against rezoning this project, pure and simple.
Well, thank you for your question, Edie. I think it was a lot, so keep me honest and make sure that we're addressing all of your questions. So for the first portion, as it relates to the concrete columns, yes, some of the concrete columns are going to be staying in there. But that's going to be part of the platform park. So where the Kroger currently sits there today, that's going to be a platform park that'll have sort of, let's just call it's going to be a square donut. And that's going to be, you're going to be able to be on top of the creek. You'll be able to see through that hole and sort of, I don't know, it's something that I really like to do when I was a kid. It's just, I think it's definitely a benefit to have it that way. But from an environmental standpoint, I do want to make sure that that David has an opportunity to better explain the sort of environmental aspects of that, because he's much smarter than me when it comes to that.
Yeah, the daylighting itself is huge in that, light's good for all of us. It's good for the critters, again, that live in the creek, and the whole food web that's built up on the creek and the benefit that it provides downstream. The pillars themselves, as I understand it, many of those will be coming out, enough of them so that it renders more light down there. And as far as the creek restoration, it's my understanding is that there will be restoration there, and that the riparian margins, the benefits that those bring to the creek, that those will be going back. We've said 2 or 3 times now, the current conditions are something that wouldn't be allowed today. I'm a native Nashvilleian. I grew up playing in Browns Creek when I was a boy, and I well remember the summer that the city put a sewer line down the substrate of Browns Creek. So there's a lot of things that went on in decades past that can't be done today. What I like about this project is that it addresses one of these past activities that have not been good for Richland Creek.
So there still is not an answer about why are you leaving any of the concrete pillars? I mean, I understand it could be this darling little place to go if that's the best you're going to make of it. But if you're cleaning it all, then why aren't you cleaning it all?
So I'll answer that, and also answer about what would be required today if somebody redeveloped in it, and that you redeveloped it in the way the creek would be. You are right that there. Okay. You are correct that a lot of this would have to be removed if they were going to build new buildings, or as Tom talked about, if it was damaged in the flood, et cetera. There is no requirement for them to build the extent of greenway and overlooks and the quality of public space within that corridor. So that is what this development is doing in addition to that. There may be, depending on what the situation is, the greenways may ask that this would be a single pathway. So there may be a point, if this wasn't the development proposal, that Metro would require a 14-foot path that would be open 24/7. But they would not require, or, I'm making assumptions based on past experience, that they would not require that you have overlooks. They would not require you to have public space in addition to that. So the idea of adding this public space as a terminus to have a destination at the end of the Richland Creek Greenway was seen as a positive by the team and an opportunity to see the creek and from a different perspective and a place for people could enjoy. Now, if the issue is that you don't like the idea of a public space that's elevated as a part of the park, then I guess that's to be debated whether there's even a park over top or not. But if there is a park that would be, it's actually more expensive because we're taking out 80% of all of the structure, cutting it down so it doesn't disturb the rest of the park. But it is way more expensive to leave the portions that we are and build access to them. If the developer was looking for the cheapest way out of this, they would tear it all down and they would not build a public space. And therefore, it was seen in all values to deciding what's important and what's to whom and whomever. But the team decided that it was a benefit to the community and a really great experience for being a part of this project, that there was a public space for people to enjoy, to see it, to really have a sense of stewardship for the creek, because they're seeing it from that other perspective, having eyes on the water so that people know that's being taken care of and can alert people if there's issues that they're seeing. So it's not about hiding the creek, it's celebrating the creek and having a place for people to gather and enjoy the creek. Now that can be debated whether it's an existing structure or a new structure, but it is by far cheaper to tear it all out and not build a public space at all. So I would just.
So you can celebrate and daylight the creek and you can lower your buildings and achieve the same thing. Is that right?
Actually,
do?
I mean,
So the creek doesn't have anything to do with the high rises. You could do such a gracious thing with the creek if you changed your plan and kept it in the current zoning, right? That would be one great option.
Edie, that's a lot. Where's the question in there so that I can better
you
answer it?
Could you all plan a development in the current zoning and still be so gracious to the creek? Just a thought.
No, I don't think that's possible. I mean, right now there's 90% impervious coverage on the land. You're talking asphalt, concrete, and so we take the theory of doing well by doing good, and there's got to be an upside for the community, and our upside, we think, for the community is being able to provide 60% of open and green public space to everyone, a place to congregate, a place to enjoy. And again, and I do want to reiterate, not just for the residents that live there, or the tenants for that matter, but for everyone who wants to go there. The people at Sugar,
My name is Erwin Bennick. I had two questions. I'm too tall. My name is Erwin Bennick, and I have two questions. The first has to do with the demolition of that concrete structure. If it's blasted, isn't that concrete structure going to fall into the creek? And how, I mean, it seems to me that's going to have some deleterious effects on downstream from that area.
To my knowledge, the plan isn't to demolish the concrete by blasting. The blasting is relegated to the excavation portions of the construction.
the blasting is specifically for the underground parking. We're not going to be blasting the buildings or anything like that. It's just for the underground parking portion.
But the concrete.
But yeah, these are big concrete buildings. And so I went and saw the Vanderbilt building come down and it was a big dust cloud. So I think, Erwin, correct me if I'm wrong, how are you going to catch the blocks that come out, the rocks that come out, the dust that comes out? How are you going to catch that from the creek? Right, Erwin?
That's about right.
Yeah.
So I think the intention, just to be clear, so the blasting is just for the garage, and as we looked at the garage is 100 feet away.
I'm concerned about what is going to end up in the creek in the process of demolishing
Right.
this existing structure?
Yeah, the existing structure will have to kind of be strategically cut apart, and there'll be a crane that kind of picks pieces away.
Okay.
We're not, obviously not going to be able to get equipment, trucks, and that sort of thing down at the creek. So it'll have to be kind of cut into pieces and pulled away from the creek.
Okay.
Very carefully. But that's the sort of thing that will also have to be in our ARAP permits that go through to show all the construction phasing and make sure that, I think your question is, you don't want debris, concrete, anything else falling in the creek while it's being demolished.
We don't want those critters that Kathleen's concerned about downstream getting
Absolutely.
inundated with silt.
Yep.
Okay.
But
the second question is exactly what is the enforcement mechanism going to be to assure access to private property from the public?
The greenway, and the green space.
Correct.
That's going to be part of the deed restriction. And I do need to get with Metro Legal, and Erwin, you being an attorney will probably probably know a little bit more about this than me. Yeah, or you. And that is something too that as we work through those, as I work with Greenways and Metro Legal to do that, I'm more than happy to have a committee of real attorneys. I only play one every second and third Tuesday of the month on TV, right? So having some feedback and making sure that y'all look at that. But Metro Greenways is going to make sure, and I'm sure that they can, I don't want to maybe say this in stone, but I'm sure that there are some penalties or fines that can be done if it is shut down in a way that, but I'm also going to assume that if there is a flooding event, and maybe Tom, you can nod your head if there is some sort of, just like the creeks in Belle Meade that are shut down when the water's high, like over the creek, I'm sure there's going to be some exceptions like that, but it will be written in there, and Metro will make sure that there's an enforcement policy, and I'll make sure that's written in there, and happy to share that deed out before it is, or whatever legal document it is, before this is finalized.
Well, it would be preferable if an entity such as Greenways could have an enforcement mechanism where they could require access to the property.
Yes, and that if that takes legislation, I'll do that legislation to give them that authority.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Erwin. Ma'am.
Hi, Kate Parrish, West Lawn Drive. I've got a couple questions for different folks on the panel. So Pablo, starting with you, you said that y'all's mission is doing well by doing good. Do you think that the people in Palo Alto that you evicted in their apartment building in order to build a hotel feel like you were doing well by doing good?
Thank you, Kate. I think that's an unfortunate, gross misunderstanding of what the issues were in
Okay, so
Palo Alto.
you didn't pay them to stop opposing you and then build a boutique hotel in their home anyway?
No,
You
quite.
didn't bully the Palo Alto Council to take your side on things?
Okay, and Kate, that's sure you read every Palo Alto daily post that was written. I get it. But no, the reality is in Palo Alto, not only did we not bully anyone, not only was the hotel president not affordable housing, it was a building that had no seismic retrofitting, it had no life safety mechanisms, there weren't any sprinklers, and the person that we bought the building from just never made any investments in there. So it was what we would call below market residential. The former mayor of Palo Alto, who's a Microsoft executive, lived in that building. This was not affordable housing.
I didn't say anything
We
about
don't,
affordable
we
housing.
don't pay anyone to stop opposing. There's a lot of people here who are in opposition of this project. I don't think anybody has received a penny from us, and certainly will never receive a penny from us. And we didn't bully a city council as well. We put forth a sound legal argument, and the city happened to agree with it, and that's what happened. But I think that's kind of an unfair mischaracterization of what actually happened.
Okay, that's your opinion. So let's bring it local. Doing well by doing good. You bought out the exit-in from under. Okay, I'll move on to the environmental time. Okay, great. Perfect. Well, then let's move on to, I'm sorry, I forget your name, from Hawkins. You said in reference to the creek, so many parts of it that feel like you're not even in the city. That's the point. We don't want to feel like we're in the city. That's why we live out here and we don't live in Midtown or the Gulch. So stop acting like you're doing us this huge favor by being here. You can do what you want to do under MUL. So do it. Stop trying to pull the wool over our eyes and make it seem like this isn't all about money. If your buildings are not tall enough, you will not make enough money. So please stop acting like we are idiots and we don't see what this is all about. There wasn't a question in there for you, Mr. Hawkins. Just more thoughts. Okay, so regarding Metro Water, the EPA has sued Nashville multiple times over its violations of the Clean Water Act. We still aren't in compliance with that today. In fact, we have more violations than we started with. A quote from a recent investigative report from Fox 17 said, "Exponential growth is crippling the aging sewer system." How are you going to make sure that I'm not walking around in everybody's number ones and number twos?
I think that's for us, Tom. So first of all, when I first got elected, it was about the time the Flint, Michigan things were coming out. And I was on the phone with Director Potter, who, well, I called Tom Dry. The director of water is much drier. And so I asked him about the safety of our drinking water and things like that. And he goes, "Council Lady Murphy, let me put it this way. My kids drink Metro water." And I said, "Do you like your children though?" And of course he said yes. And so it is safe. I've got bottled water right now just because I was bringing it with me, but our Metro water is safe to drink and to shower and bathe in. And so Tom, do you want to speak more to that? And I know we just,
I'm
even this
actually
week
not
passed
talking
more.
about the drinkability. We know that's safe. That's been proven. I'm talking about when things flood, our sewer system. We don't have the current infrastructure in place to take care of the problems we have now.
Yeah,
So
so
what are you
there's,
going to do with 300 more?
so Metro Water Services has been under a consent decree with TDEC for a number of years, and we're spending millions of dollars under that. And so it's really, I mean, we could have a 3-hour meeting and just start scratching the surface of what we're doing from the sanitary sewer part of it. But we are in, again, there's an order in place and there's spending in place and there's projects all over the county that are doing that. And obviously that's our main goal, is to be able to send good drinking water to homes and take
Not
away the
talking about
sewage,
drinkability.
take away the sewage and treat it correctly. If you happen to go by our main wastewater treatment plant at Central, there's an optimization project going on right now, which is going to increase the capacity of that plant. So we would have a lot to say if you wanted to have a special meeting about what we're doing from a water and sewer standpoint, mainly a sewer standpoint.
When's the next Citizens Academy that y'all do?
I'd have to check. I mean,
Okay.
there is a
They do have a Citizens Academy. I got to do, I don't know if Councilman Druffel, if y'all haven't done it, you should definitely do it. But they have a Citizens Water Academy where you can learn about all of our infrastructure and tour some really phenomenal sites that aren't open to the public. And then secondary, I guess it was 4 years ago now, the council is actually kind of serves as, what is it, kind of a quasi board or whatnot. The council is now required to take about 12 hours. Yeah, you had to take, I'm termed out, so Tom got to take it again. But we had to take 12 hours of training to have more oversight over Metro Water. And so all of these things are improved me. And trust me, like 12 hours of stormwater training and things was not, it was interesting, but it was a lot, but we have a lot more oversight now. We had more legislation passed this past Tuesday, and we're continuing, as you see, your stormwater. Well, I don't like that we're doing this, but your stormwater fee is increasing in your bill. I'm sure y'all have started to notice that. And that is so we can make things right that were wrong in the future. Again, I mentioned I had a creek. I've got manholes in that creek, and it is something that we all have to keep an eye on, and making sure that our adopt a stormwater drain and all of that type of thing. So it's really something we all have to come together to do. Kate, do you have another on environmental?
Permit me. So just a question for John. So what happens when it rains today? And then what will happen when it rains after our development is completed, if we're
Sure.
lucky enough to get there?
So a lot of the runoff is proportional to the impervious surfaces. We talked about that a little bit at the start, that right now the site's about 90% impervious. And as we back this off, it's going to be about 60% impervious. So there's going to be a lot less water coming off the site. I think this, to speak to some of your points about water and sewer, I think a lot of the sewer decrees you're reading about are in the older parts of town, what we call a combined sewer area. So that's areas where kind of antiquated systems carry both sanitary sewer and stormwater. And what you get in those flood events is that the sewer systems cannot convey all the stormwater that runs into them. And so they overflow at points into the Cumberland River. That's kind of the fines that Metro gets. So the good thing is we are outside of that area. This is what we call separated, so that the sewer lines, there's a 30-inch, is a large sewer main that kind of follows the creek. And the storm lines are separate systems in this state. In this situation, but also speak to some of your questions about investment, that any project, any new project has to go through a couple steps with Metro Water Services. The first thing they do is they request a water and sewer availability capacity analysis. So that's a report that we put together that shows all of the water and sewer that the development is using currently, and then all the water and sewer that development would be using afterwards. And then they do some modeling to make sure that their infrastructure can handle that. And if there's any infrastructure upgrades that are needed, Metro Water Services will require the project to do that before building permits. And even if there are no infrastructure improvements needed, there's what's called a water and sewer capacity fee. And a project like this, it's at least going to be six figures, many millions of dollars, maybe seven figures, but it actually went up about 2 years ago. So there's a pretty stiff fee that this project will have to pay that goes towards sewer plant upgrades, water plant upgrades, and that sort of thing. So be glad to talk more specifics, but there is a pretty robust kind of system that any new project has to go through to make sure that they're not burdening the water and sewer infrastructure.
So if we haven't been able to rely on Metro Water to protect us under the Clean Water Act, and in fact have only increased our violations, we're supposed to now start trusting you?
Okay, so we're going to take this one last question. I'm going to give it to Palco, and then we need to move on to traffic because we're 20 after, and I'm sorry to keep you all.
I would just say that I would suggest you contact Sonia Allman, our PIO. We can have a separate conversation offline.
We could talk about it now too.
I dispute the fact that Metro is not doing an adequate job in the sewer realm, and I would not agree today that our number of violations are increasing. I don't agree with what you're saying.
Okay.
All right, thank you. So we need
Thank you.
Trish, do you have a? Can we save, we're going to come back to all these topics at the end, but we need to move on to traffic because I know a lot of you are here for that as well. So if we need to play musical chairs, y'all go ahead and start playing musical chairs, and we will get rolling there. Do we need to move any slides or anything? Anything else needs to change? Are we good? Sorry, as I see you walk away. Okay, great. All right, so Beth is back. Y'all may remember Beth from before. And I will say, most of y'all know this as they're playing musical chairs. Most of y'all know this. Like I said, I live on the White Birch Road Neighborhood Association. Beth also lives in that area, and so she is not far. She understands because she drives in it every day with her children and her family. My mother and father both live within 2 miles of this, and the Druffels can confirm that if I mess this up, they will move me away and never be heard from again, right? So, Beth, let's talk about traffic, because one question that I do want you to point out as we get to these maps is we've had a lot of discussion about the entrances and exits changing. And so I really would like you to kind of walk us through how many entrance exits there are now when you get to those slides. Because I'm going to ask, that's going to be my first up question, is kind of what are we taking away? What is being added? And so if you could focus on that as you get through those slides. So Beth, y'all have met with KCI, and KCI does work for developers and they do work for Metro. And so they're kind of like a Switzerland of having to answer to two bosses, because whatever work they do, their math is checked by NDOT, and they've got to meet those guidelines as well. So Beth, go ahead.
Thank you. So Beth Ostrowski, KCI, Kathleen gave me a great intro, so I'll skip all of that. I don't know that my slides are going to match what you're thinking they're going to look like. So we'll flip back to a site plan if we need to. Really today, if you did not get handouts when you walked in, raise your hand. Does everybody have the handouts? What I am saving, I'm not presenting very much. I'm basically discussing the handouts, making sure you understand what you're looking at, and then opening it up to Q&A, because I know that there's a lot of questions that y'all have, and I want to save the time for that. I also think it's really important to say that I don't really have anything new or different from a week and a half ago. What I said a week and a half ago is still true. We have been working feverishly with NDOT. I've probably spoken to NDOT every single day since we met a week and a half ago. We have answered some questions and some comments that they have sent us. We have gotten some more information to them, but we have not determined conditions with them, and we have not, I don't have any announcements on things that NDOT is going to be conditioning on this project any different than what I said a week and a half ago. But Megan is here again to help me, and I have at least some cheater pages here, so hopefully all of your questions can get answered, and we'll save time for that. In terms of the handouts, you have two handouts that are slightly different. The first one, the one that is project specific, is the one that says traffic study at a glance and Belle Meade Plaza at the top. The things that I would like to highlight for you is on the middle of the front page, this is a section that basically creates an infographic identifying the trip generation for the Belle Meade Plaza site under existing conditions, the current daily site trips, and then under future conditions, future daily site trips at the bottom. You can see the little icons breaking out the different uses. There are in the upper right-hand corner, you have the equations. That's in direct response to a question that we received last time about how trip generation works. Those equations, the results of those equations are the daily trips generated by the site, not the AM peak hour and the PM peak hour. One page was really tough for us. But those are the equations for daily trips generated by the site for each of those land uses. And then on the bottom right-hand corner, you just have some math kind of totaling how we got to the number of trips generated by the site and the difference in trips generated by the site. I'll answer questions if anybody has trouble understanding this when we get through. So on the back, on the top of the back, there is a map that identifies KCI's recommendations in our traffic impact study. Again, NDOT has not finished their review, so this is what KCI has recommended, not what NDOT has ultimately conditioned on the development. I anticipate that NDOT will generally agree with these, and if anything, they would add on to what the project has to do, not subtract. In terms of the icons, if you look on the right, there's the number 6 in the orange circle. How you find what that is on your handout is it looks a little different. It's underneath on your handout, but under the orange circle that says traffic access is number 6, and then you can read what is called out there just as a single example. Also on here towards the bottom of the screen and towards the bottom of the map on your handout is level of service. If you've seen me present before, you've probably heard me explain level of service. Level of service is the letter grade that we give to an intersection based on the number of seconds of delay on average per vehicle. So a level of service A is an intersection that operates really well. A level of service B operates a little bit worse, and so on and so forth, down to a level of service F. So the second handout you have is the mobility study at a glance. I'm going to click through this one really quickly because really it's the exact same thing. The difference here is that we are looking at the Harding Pike area in general, and we have looked at 3 different proposed developments in the area: the Belle Meade Plaza project, 4416 Ridgefield Way, and the Harding Town Center project. So we're looking at all 3 of those independently. It changes, the studies are different. And the reason the studies are different, and you can read it at the bottom of the front page of each of your handouts, is because a traffic impact study is designed to be limited in nature to look at the specific impact of one development. The mobility study is unique in nature and is designed to look at the impact of all of these developments holistically and look at the needs of the community on a broader scale. So less targeted, more broad. So here's the trip generation, very similar to what you see on the first handout. And then the recommended improvements are here. There's obviously a lot more dots on this one because we're looking at a broader area and we're looking at more projects. So therefore we have more recommendations. But these are virtually the same in terms of what you're looking at on the 2. And if you have any questions just about how to read something or about anything that I've said previously, I am glad to do that. Can I open up to questions, Kathleen? Yeah, one more forward. Oh. This guy?
So this is, I mean, usually my voice carries enough. So this is our current situation where we've got the number, where number 7 is the current kind of write-in only. Is that correct?
Yeah, let me talk through. Do you want me to talk through the
Yeah,
access
yeah.
points? Yeah, thank you. It wasn't part of what I had prepared, so I forgot. Where you're looking at number 7 on the bottom is currently a write-in only. Where you see the number 1 and the number 10 is the existing signal. That signal is to remain. Where you see the number 8 is an existing full access unsignalized intersection that we are going to change to a right and right out. Where the number 7 is going to be closed. So it is no longer going to be there.
So, but number 6 is currently a permanent easement as well, in and out?
Correct. Where number 6 is, that's where you go under White Bridge Pike, is a permanent access easement, and that access will be maintained.
So if you are taking the current number of in and outs, you are only removing what will be, so there is 1, 2, 3, 4, let's say 4 ways
today
in. You are subtracting how many?
1.
Okay. And that was something that has come in a lot, is that y'all are making this 1 in, 1 out. And so I just wanted to verify that on the map and show it. So questions on traffic and all of Beth's world, please come on up.
On the mobility study, I don't see the level of service for the Woodmont, White Bridge Road, Harding. Once all these other developments are put in place, it's on the Belle Meade one, but it's not on this one.
Yeah, we can absolutely talk.
I thought you said it was going to F.
It does go to F.
Okay.
It's
But remember, so NDOT has not finalized their recommendations. So while this may be what the development is proposing, NDOT may and probably most likely will be requiring some other improvements that hopefully would make that better.
Well, and
Like I said before, there are some things that, you know, they have brought to our attention that I've said, NDOT, please go ahead and do. And NDOT is a lot better than it used to be. And they've got some other plans. And I'm hoping that we will be able to have that a meeting strictly with NDOT and their recommendations in the very near future.
yeah, let me give a little bit longer answer on that too. So today, you can see it right here. It's on your handout for Belle Meade Plaza. Today, that intersection operates as a D in the morning and an E in the afternoon. And what future no build means, maybe is self-explanatory, but is what the intersection looks like in the future if nothing new is built and there's no improvement. So future no build will be an E in the morning and an E in the afternoon. So I think we all know it's not a level of service A or B today. Correct. Yes. Yeah. I know E isn't a school letter grade, so that one's a little confusing for people.
I noticed that you have future daily trips. You have 329 morning peak trips and 613 afternoon or evening peak trips on your traffic study. Is that right? What are the hours considered peak?
So and help me, Megan, if I misspeak, the peak hour, we collect data for multiple hours in the morning and multiple hours in the afternoon, and we find the actual peak hour, the actual highest hour of traffic data, and that's what we use. In the morning, I believe it is 7:30 to 8:30, 7:15 to 8:15, and in the afternoon, it's 4:45 to 5:45.
Okay, and then you've separated out 1,804 multifamily trips. Is that not included in your peak numbers?
Oh, no, those are the daily. No, what you're looking at on the infographic that shows the 422 and then the 5402 and then the 1,804, those are daily trips.
No, I'm
So-
looking at your future daily trips, your little circle. You have the
Yep,
morning.
and in the circle where it says 1,804 at the bottom there,
Mhm.
the multifamily will generate 1,800 trips over the course of 24 hours. That's
So
why
you-
it's daily.
So you've pulled the multifamily trips out of your peak trip numbers.
No, ma'am. What the circle shows is what happens, the whole circle, everything shown on the circle represents what happens over a 24-hour period.
Okay.
And then to the right is just a highlight summary of what the AM looks like and what the PM looks like.
But that doesn't come up to 1,804. You've got
Because-
multifamily trips from the apartments.
Right. And I think maybe to clarify, so the future daily site trips, so we
Mhm.
have that circle.
Yeah.
That's over the course of 24 hours.
Right.
The AM peak trips and the PM peak trips are just 1 hour each during the day. So
I got that.
there will not be 1,804 trips from the multifamily in that one given hour. But
Right.
part of the 329 and part of the 613 certainly includes some of the multifamily trips that would be taken during their respective hours.
So, and let me,
It's-
Because that is the highest impact. I mean,
so
you have to understand from our perspective, we love trees, we love greenways, and we love creeks. We're not against that. I mean, we live in a neighborhood that celebrates all of that. So you don't have to, in your sales pitches, we get that. You don't have to push that. The traffic is a big part of this. And to say that multifamily buildings are not going to increase the congestion in the peak hours is not logical. If you go, I challenge you to spend a few minutes on Charlotte Pike near Cabot. There's a lot of new apartments on Charlotte, and the traffic on Charlotte does not come from Nashville West, which has been there many years. It doesn't come from Walmart. It comes from the apartments. If you sit at that light on Charlotte at Cabot, there is a steady stream of cars flowing from those apartments. They stop at the light on Charlotte, and then they get onto the interstate at 40. Those are from the apartments, and those are peak. To put that congestion on West End or Harding with these apartments is going to create gridlock.
I hear you, but unfortunately, that's not what the data shows. So
That's why I challenge you to
I
go sit at Charlotte and Cabot in the morning and look at that stream of cars and then compare that with your data and tell me which is real.
I don't know how many units that is, but we will absolutely go
It's more
observe. We spend a
units-
lot of time doing traffic observations.
We have no units now on that corner and we have traffic. Adding those units is going to increase your morning traffic and your evening traffic.
So Margie, I don't necessarily disagree that the numbers do seem a little shocking here, but the Cabot, those apartments, I'm not as familiar lately, but if I recall, they have less access in and out.
Actually, they don't.
And
They
so
have a
that's part of
couple.
it.
They have a couple and they've
They have
got
a
some
couple.
major roads that come out and
Okay.
around. So that's just one
Yeah.
access point. And we also have a lot less going on
But
there.
also we'll have at our, I guess I should start calling it the traffic mega meeting. At the traffic mega meeting, I will make sure that NDOT further explains because I think that's kind of that's our fact checker here. Ma'am?
Yes, I
And then
live
we'll
on
come here.
Harding, excuse me, Pike, and it's before the Belle Meade Shopping Center. But I also lived in New York for several years in the 90s. So I'm happy to walk. I took the bus 20 years downtown. I'm happy to walk. I'm happy to use the bus service or any kind of Metro Trans service. If it seems like in COVID, they took things away. If you want people to ride, let's put nice stops so people don't have to, can actually say, invite you to come use it. I also walk around the neighborhood. So I walk all the way down to Wilson or by the fire station, come back in through Wilson. There's a mishmash of sidewalks. Then I also drive in this area. So if I'm hemmed in getting out on Woodlawn Drive during the hour, you say, now if there's a wreck on 40, you might want to extend that on either side a little longer. So I challenge you, anybody from NDOT, let's do a walk around the area, because I even tried to walk up to the Shell station and it's a mishmash of sidewalks. Some further in, some further out. I don't know. That would help because the people on the south side don't feel comfortable walking to the other side where all the stuff is. That's basically we would want to go to. So until that is satisfied, if I'm having a problem walking as a pedestrian around the neighborhood of which I live in, and then I have a trouble getting out of my driveway because of whatever the school, Montgomery Bell, of where it's Innsworth, those people technically probably don't live in the neighborhood. So you've got, and then you're going to engage, which is fine with me, but I have to address the access, which is what the first gentleman's question started with, whether it's stormwater, greenway, access just driving my car, or even having the ability to, in a wonderful area, to actually walk to something that's really not for those who can and still want to walk to a shopping center that I want to go to, that a restaurant I want to go to safely. This should probably be the benchmark for anything that would happen in Nashville going forward. Now, you're trying to attract also certain people who live here. If you attract a tourist, if you have elderly, more elderly, if we're talking about gradients of people who would live here in the additional residential, how are you going to deal with when there is flooding? Because we all have that saying, turn around, don't drown. People who don't know the area, are we going to be doing education, which I think would be helpful, because I know there's people coming through Harding, even when it's flooded, drown the cop car out. I knew enough seeing everybody's brake lights to stop and go back there in through Belle Meade and come back out on White Ridge Road. So if I can't get around with traffic backing up on Woodlawn Drive, I then walk further down to Kenner, traffic's backing up there. Everything is getting more log jams, so until we institute some accessible things for the existing people who live here, how can we engage people to come in? So that means we have to have a network of things. We have to have a network of buses, a network of lights, sidewalks, greenways that can help, like a network, move things around. And the other thing I'm going to challenge is, let's go to the sustainability of this. Let's think about green roofs. That adds another layer. How about in Highline, like what's going on in New York City, to basically help get from this side specifically, because you've got access on the other side to go underneath White Bridge Road, to get up there in a green spot. Because what if I could walk all the way, besides on the side of Publix, up that greenway safely to all that destination? I think I should be able to get back this way too. So then you've cut out, we'll all have to learn how to, but then we've got a boomer population that's getting elderly. We have to basically think about who's going to be able to walk, who's going to be able to ride a bike. Yes, let's invite people here, but we have to satisfy the issues with access for us initially before we can engage other people.
Ma'am, I totally agree. So if you received my email or saw it on social media, at the bottom of that email, I have links to our transportation plan. I may not have our sidewalk plan, but I'll put it on there. We are woefully, woefully, woefully behind on our sidewalks. And I agree with you. I grew up on South Wilson. My father still lives there. And part of the reason that in 2016, I got a sidewalk approved on Bowling is because you get landlocked in those neighborhoods. And so everything you said is exactly right. We've got to get the transportation plan. We've got to get that moving. We've got to get the mobility plan moving. We have to make these improvements, but we are a very large county. And I know, traffic calming is something that we do twice a year of applications. They just came through and we didn't get any projects this time, but we got 3 projects last time. And so I would love to encourage you to email me or go ahead and put into the hub each of these places that are giving you, like, where you're like, this is a gap in a sidewalk, or or even if it's a broken sidewalk, any of those things that you see out walking, report it into the hub, send me the hub case number, and I'm going to funnel it over to TDOT or NDOT and be like, this is an easy fix or that's an easy fix. I just chewed NDOT out because without talking to me, they started a sidewalk project on 51st, when on this side of West End, I have more pedestrian needs than in other parts of my district. And so it has taken over 7 years to get the Bowling sidewalk done, and we're going to have a meeting on that in a few weeks. But cheers to you. Thank you. Thank you for those things said, because that is exactly what I would love for you to send me an email on, so I can send it into NDOT and say this times 10.
Last thing I want to say, this whole area, not just this area, but everything that's in this area, include if it could be connected up to White Bridge Road, it's a circulatory system. It's a network. If one thing doesn't work right, nothing works right. So we have to get it right and let people get what they need, because if I could walk somewhere and not have to drive somewhere, I'm happy to do it because I still can.
And Miss, I didn't catch your name.
My name is Tanya Blades.
Hi, Tanya. I think my colleague Ryan Doyle can add a little something about the sidewalks.
So Tanya, along Harding, and this graphic doesn't show it well, but there'll be pedestrian sidewalks added all the way from White Bridge Road, all the way down to Sugar Tree Creek, where the culvert narrows the road.
But
at a
I'm walking
minimum.
from the neighborhoods, because if you look at this, even now, the residential is on the south side. They can't safely get to the other side. That includes everybody coming from the south.
Beth and I can get there fine. We're talking about coming from
connectors.
And so the other recommendation and plan we have is to improve the pedestrian crosswalks, both at our main entrance that's mid-block there, but also at White Bridge Road.
But before I get to that crosswalk, I need a safe spot to walk and not in a mishmash of developer who's done some housing and has great sidewalks to a gutter and somebody, and I don't know if that's the city's responsibility or what.
So I think Kathleen did a great job of answering this previously, and the city has a robust sidewalk program that is feverishly building sidewalks as quickly as they can and is very well funded. But like Kathleen said, it's just the county is so enormous, and I know you're fighting hard to get everything you can in our district.
Obnoxiously. Departments will tell you that too. Council Lady Angie Henderson is our sidewalk hero. If you don't know her, she's District 34. She's a little further west. She passed legislation. The reason you're seeing mismatched sidewalks, while it is annoying, it is it is genius legislation what she passed. And so these new homes, new developments that are coming in, for example, on Woodmont and Estes, you see some little, you saw those, trying to use my nice words. You saw that row of new homes come in that are kind of HPRs, kind of like detached duplexes, right? And they had to do a nice sidewalk there. And then you don't have anything till you get further down until Abe's Garden on Woodmont, right? That sidewalk is there because we have legislation triggering it with that new development. So because the city can't get there, we can't build sidewalks fast enough. We're making the developers do it when they build new sidewalks. The same is with if you have a private resident or at your home, if you're doubling the size, there is a level that you trigger and you have to do the sidewalk improvement. So that's why you see the mismatch, and it's awful for now, but eventually what happens is that part, again, using the Estes and Woodmont example, so you've got that corner taken care of, and then further down, you have like where the Manning is building or where another house is built. Then NDOT, Metro, your dollars, your taxpayer dollars, can come in and do a smaller sidewalk instead of having to do the larger project. And so it looks like a mismatch. It is annoying to be on and off and on and off. But in the long run, it makes it cheaper and easier and faster for Metro to build those sidewalks. And I probably did not do that justice, but it's great. Go ahead.
All right. I want to deviate just a little bit, but I got actively involved in what's being done in the market when I changed my position businessly when I got into real estate. And I started going to public meetings. And one of them had to do when the H.G. Hill Center, where Public is located. And the discussion then, that's probably been 15 to 20 years ago. And there was discussion about what are we going to do with the traffic? Now, in that 15, 20 years, we all know that nothing's been done about the traffic. Now, in that discussion, I talked with someone that has much deeper knowledge as far as Metro is concerned, that the traffic issue was discussed even before that bridge that's the extension of White Bridge Road to Harding. Because when I was a teenager, that was 60 years ago, I went across that pedestrian bridge to get to the other side. Well, you ought to go one way. So that 60 years has been a problem, and nothing yet has been done. Now, I call that intersection up there, and I'm being polite, Malfunction Junction. Malfunction Junction. Now, I want to know what TDOT and NDOT, and nobody's going to be able to convince me that they haven't got studies. And some of these people that are at that table probably have talked to some of them. Have been. I had a cousin that was there at TDOT for 40 years, but I haven't talked to him about this. I can, and he could probably enlighten me on what they've been talking about. So don't anybody come back publicly and say, well, we haven't studied this. That's not true. Now we need to do something, and we need to do something now. And this is an ideal time to address it, because this development, whether the developer realizes it or not, if something isn't done about Malfunction Junction, it's going to affect in future years this development. And there's going to be another one over there on White Bridge Road as big as this one. And H.G. Hill, in conjunction with St. Thomas Midtown, that location, they're going to redevelop that property. And supposedly it's going to be a hotel there. So I don't know what H.G. Hill has done about moving forward with the development, but they're starting to move some of their long-term tenants out, which is MAPCO the Truist Bank is going to be moving out, and then that eye center down the street, down in the property is moving. Because I have a friend that goes there, and he says that, yep, we're going. We've been told to move. And I walked that whole property all along the creek where those two where they converge. And if anybody's hasn't, it drops off from Harding. You get further back on that property, it drops off. So I don't know how they're going to get out of the plane, to build anything there. But that's not the problem here. The problem is it needs to address malfunction junction, as I call it, and I won't mention it anymore, but I want you to remember it. It needs to be done. TDOT, NDOT, and this information, and some of it may be old, and they have to update it, but it needs to be done now. Thank you.
I agree with you. And so that is where NDOT is working on their final recommendations. And I am lighting fires to get that kind of mega traffic meeting going on. I do want to speak to that. Nashville does a really bad job with making a lot of plans and then not finishing them out. Part of the Hardingtown UDO did have a transportation plan. That's probably what you're referring to. That was about 15 years ago. And then the St. Thomas and Hill Center SP did get they got into a lawsuit over the floodplain and that kind of thing. And so that was final and approved 7 years ago. Here's the problem is that plan was put together 15 years ago. Things have changed since then. And I would love to have a site plan for what they're planning to do at the Ice Center and the Taco Bell and at St. Thomas. I haven't seen it. And they're starting to move things and they're starting to have conversations, and it's really hard. It's holding us up from being able to make decisions about what we want to see and where, because it's not like capture the flag and you got to put your flag there and you get it because you said it first. They need to decide what they're doing. We have a plan in front of us, but overall, that transportation plan has not been put into place because it's been 15 years and they haven't acted on their entitlements. And in my opinion, if you're going to do a plan and make these commitments or make these plans with the community and then not act on them, then you should be relooked at. Those plans should be relooked at because you can't just sit on a plan for 15 years and then not move forward. So, sir, I hear you, and it is very frustrating. Yeah, they're getting ready to, but they haven't shared it with me, the councilwoman. And that's where it is hard for me to help us through this, wade through the whole muddy water of Malfunction Junction when they're playing hide the plans. So I think I may be been trying to stay pretty neutral and things, but I think y'all got a little bit of an opinion there. We'll go here and then here. And I'm sorry, I'll try to keep those comments to myself, or I'll email them to you later.
Hi. I'm new to traffic studies, so I just have kind of a simple, stupid question here. I'm looking at your study results here on the page where we start off with 14,000 daily trips, and you've kind of magically reduced that to 7,600 daily trips. And I get kind of how it works, which is we've massively increased the square footage in the Belle Meade Plaza development. But we've made a huge trade-off here between residential and retail. And that retail drives a lot less traffic, okay? So we've given up, I believe it's about 60% of our retail. We're gonna give up, right? Our convenience of that retail, we're giving up. And because that drives more traffic, that's how these numbers drop so drastically. So I get, you mentioned the data before, I get how the data gets you to that point. But I just have a kind of a simple question here. You're assuming that the people that shop at these retail stores, the Kroger, et cetera, just kind of disappear. If I live in West Meade and I'm driving to that Kroger for my groceries, I'm gone. But no, I'm not gone, because I have to still drive down West End, and I'm now even driving farther. But yet, I'm not on this schedule. I've been removed from this schedule. You're a traffic analyst. Where's that number? All these people that shop at these retail locations now, they still have to shop somewhere. They still have to eat. They're not on this. They've been removed. Yet the traffic could be higher from them because they have to drive farther now. Now they have to drive down to the intersection. Now they have to drive down White Bridge. We've increased our traffic problem.
So I'm going to start with the grocery question first. And and you've heard me say this before, there are two different studies, and the mobility study does assume I don't know if it's fact or not that the Kroger is actually going to move, but the mobility study does assume that Kroger moves, or a grocery store goes into the Ridgefield site. So in that broader mobility study that is remember, a traffic impact study is limited by design to look at the impact of a singular development. The mobility study is broader in order to look at the holistic needs of the community and the neighborhood. So in the mobility study, we absolutely look at how people moved from the one location of a grocer to the other location of a grocer. To the impact study that is pulled up right here for this site specifically, you are right that we are, quote unquote, deleting some of those grocery trips. Many people will not have to drive through this intersection to go to a grocer. Some people will. We also, in a traffic impact study, include generalized background growth. And so that means the increase of people that are driving on the road going to other destinations outside of our study area. So we have a generalized background growth, and that is where I would put the category of people that are still going to a different grocery store that are driving through these study intersections. I think they are captured in our analysis, in that portion of our analysis.
Okay, I get that. So you're saying this study is kind of worthless.
No, the study is absolutely not worthless. It is looking at us to answer a specific set of questions.
But that's not a question we need answered. The question we need answered is, how is it going to affect the traffic flow in the entire area?
I think
This does not answer that question at all.
so. We don't have that from NDOT yet. That's when we're going to have when we get the information from NDOT for the mobility study of this whole area and all the projects combined. That's when we're going to be able to see those numbers. This study is a spotlight, just like any traffic study, any project, they do a spotlight.
I'm sorry, it's a worthless study. Let's be honest.
It doesn't answer your
this is
questions, but it
worthless.
does answer the question of
Why-
this development.
Just stop telling us you're going to reduce traffic by 40%. That's a ridiculous assertion.
I think that's a question
No,
that we'll
that's
have
a
to have in depth.
ridiculous assertion.
I'm not asserting that, sir, but that's something that I will
You're
have.
trying to imply that.
Sir, I'm not. I'm your
This should-
councilwoman.
I know you're not, and you should be working for us.
And that is why
You
I'm
should
having
be asking these
NDOT.
questions.
That is why I'm having NDOT have a meeting and validate
Please.
what is true and what
Please
is not
represent
true.
us.
And that is
You
what I'm
should
trying
be
to do,
asking
sir.
these questions.
Ma'am, your question.
Carolyn Walton, White Bridge Road. I've been living there for 17 years. Now, I have a Kroger on Charlotte and I have a Kroger in Belle Meade. I'd rather go to the one in Belle Meade. Now, I see you're on the other previous screen, the case study, but on a Friday, if it's raining, you can hang it up. You're locked down. You're stuck there. So you need to multiply that by 2 more times, because if you're looking at the basic traffic now, if it's disturbed at all, it's a headache. Okay. And another thing, Councilwoman, I know you work for us. I've seen you throughout today shut people down or break them up when they're talking. Don't do that, because election's gonna be coming up soon. Don't say that you're for us. Okay. Thank you.
I'm kind of on the same points. I'd like to ask some questions about the mobility study at a glance. What's unclear is my impression from what you just said and from looking at it, showing these 3 different projects, some of which we don't know all the details of, is that it's an a projection of what it'll be after the. So the first question is, on the Ridgeway Way daily trips and Harding Town Center daily trips, is that an estimate of what we expect after they develop those areas?
So yeah, I don't think that we're really here to talk about those two, but I'll talk about them just super briefly. They are estimates either based on what has been submitted to planning, which I think is true for Ridgefield, maybe. There's been preliminary meetings, the old theater site.
Yes, so for full disclosure, I know that the Belle Meade Plaza, Belle Meade Movie Theater, they have, I don't know if they formally submitted, but they have gotten feedback from planning, and they would also like apartments over the theater. And so they contacted me earlier this week to start scheduling meetings, but having this weekend, I told them they have to wait until I get through the weekend. So full disclosure, I know that is coming. Where the Kroger's is, they want apartments above that, but I have not heard back from planning their feedback. And so until I have that conversation with planning, we need to deal with one thing at a time on some of these. So.
But I'll say in general, for when we do traffic impact studies, what I tell developers is we want to be conservative in every way we can be. So if you aren't sure if you're building 100 hotel rooms or 200 hotel rooms, I should do my analysis at 200 hotel rooms, so I'm analyzing the worst case scenario. It also provides a bit of a buffer as developments change, which they do all the time. And I don't really know what you guys do, how you make that magic math happen, but they work through processes that just shift the number of units and things like that. And it gives some protection to both sides that we've analyzed the worst case scenario.
No, I think the question most people have is what's going to be the overall impact on traffic for the whole area, and not just that one project. That one project sends a Kroger away that will locate somewhere else. And your mobility study at a glance doesn't tell us what the before and after change is. What will it be? How will it change the overall area, including all three projects? That's what my question is about. I think we understand that the Belle Meade Plaza will generate less traffic without the Kroger. We also expect the Kroger will move down the street. After all that is done, will your project cause there to be more traffic overall because it relocates the Kroger?
So what you have in your hand, those are great questions. Thank you. I'm going to try to hit them all. What you have in your hand is a one-page summary for the impact study and for the mobility study that Kathleen asked for a week and a half ago. Our mobility study is over 1,000 pages with the 900 pages with the appendix. It's really hard to boil it down to a one-page summary. So there are some, I put the things that I thought folks would understand. We do have analysis, full detailed analysis for each of the intersections with the levels of service and delay, both with KCI's recommendations included and without KCI's recommendations included in the full report. Without any recommendations in the mobility study, absolutely traffic gets worse because you're adding density without doing anything to fix it. With our recommendations, we're able to mitigate a good part of that. But in the conversations we've been having with NDOT, we're hoping to mitigate it even further. And I can't share any of the discussions I've had because we don't have any decisions, but we really are hoping to truly mitigate the increase in delay and any queues and anything like that caused by these developments with the conditions that are going to be put on the projects in the mobility study. Was there one more?
Well, like I said, I think your mobility study is projecting a future expectation based on what I know is you can't be perfectly sure about that. But there's no information about the current amount of traffic in those areas other than you've given us a before and after for Belle Meade Plaza, but you've not given us a before on Hardingtown and Ridgeway as it is now compared to what it may be in the future.
Yeah, candidly, there just really wasn't enough space to do that for each of the three developments.
And that's the question everybody wants to know about.
So the impact study is available on the website. The mobility study will be available on the website. For people that enjoy a little light reading, the best way to understand it is probably to go through it. I can continue to make summaries and memos, but I do know I won't be able to answer all the questions, but we can try. We can absolutely try.
So we have the room till 5:30. We're at 5:07. So rapid fire, or just start coming up to the mic.
Yep. Quick question. I see that retail will comprise the bulk of the traffic for the new development, even though it's being cut by 60%. But we all know that retail is not created equal. And all I've heard so far is that there will be a coffee shop. In addition to the coffee shop, my worst case traffic scenario is a Chick-fil-A, or Costco. I know it's not going to be that case, but is this going to be populated with Hermes stores or dry cleaners, or what do you envision to comprise the retail component?
Yeah, I mean, our plan is to have over 30 shops that range from the cafes you've heard about. We keep talking about the Starbucks, but full service restaurants, fast casual restaurants, shopping, gifts, jewelers, apparel, all those, a full mix, a lifestyle center, similar to some of the Hill Center projects you've probably seen around the market, but in a walkable community. And you park, get out of your car, and enjoy it, in a safe, well-planned retail merchandising mix.
Good. I appreciate that. Since I'm here, let me ask one more question. This is for you, Kathleen. As a sometime developer myself, and having to sit on the other side of the table, I appreciate what you're doing, but I also know that there are certain obligations. Essentially, what you're asking for is a 70% pickup in FAR and developable square footage, and I pretty much equate that to a 70% increase in the value of the property, and that is great. However, incumbent upon you as a developer is a pretty high level of give back to the community, and I know that the way you propose doing that is with the greenway, with daylighting the creek in part, and of course creating more green space. I would argue, however, and we heard that a little bit earlier today, that a lot of that would be done or obligated, an obligation for you as a developer, regardless of how big the development is. If you're selling multi-million-dollar condos, of course, there's an expectation on behalf of the owners to beautify the creek and add more green space. So I'm personally torn as to whether this is a fait accompli, this was going to be done anyway, or this is an incremental benefit. And if it is, regardless of the benefit in totality, Kathleen, does that rise to the level of a 70% increase in value to this developer? As an elected official, how do you create that balance sheet in your mind?
So I typically, I look at it as it's not my job to increase anybody's property value, right? Like that's not giving them more, doing more, or if you make an investment in a property and you pay however much and you need to get an ROI, that doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is what we're getting in the community. And so the greenway and daylighting the creek. Now, daylighting the creek would happen with pretty much most development that clears the site, that didn't just move back into the building. But the greenway and things are things that would not be required, that we would have to negotiate with a different developer or something if somebody else came along. I think that some of the traffic improvements, we're hearing like a miniature version, but I think what NDOT is going to be proposing and requiring of this development and others is going to be a huge benefit, probably incremental over time. We might not realize it immediately because all of these projects take multiple years. And so there is a huge, yes, there is a cost benefit analysis to the public and to how much are we inconvenienced, how much is it changing the landscape, but also another weighing factor is, does it meet the community plan and those policies? Because Nashville spends, I know I said we make a lot of plans and we don't follow through. Nashville Next is a plan that is evaluated, and every project is evaluated against at the Planning Commission twice a month. I sat on it for 2 years, and that is where the community came together and said, this is what we do and don't want to see in our community. And that policy is really what guides me. What the community, what the what the Planning Commission says and recommendations and their staff, because they are the policy experts on land use, means a whole lot to me. And so that is kind of how we get to my different equations and things like that. So that's not necessarily like a math equation. I failed math twice in high school. Sorry, sister. It was at Father Ryan. But you know, there isn't like a checkmark balance sheet that I have per se. Charlotte?
Yes, my name is Charlotte Cooper. On what you were just saying about it was the public who decided what they wanted and what they didn't. Belle Meade Plaza was put into the Green Hills Midtown Community Plan, and no specific meetings were held because Nashville Next was going on. So the planning department told the neighbors in Green Hills when we started asking about updating the Green Hills Midtown Community Plan, well, we can't have any specific plan, so we'll just take the information we gather from Nashville Next. And of course, that was all over Davidson County. So really, the people under the jurisdiction of Green Hills Midtown Community Plan did not have any say in saying they thought Belle Meade Plaza should be designated as a T5 RG. When there is nothing on White Bridge Road that is T5, it is all T4, NE, or NM. So anyway, I just wanted to say that. That really wasn't my question, but when you brought it up about the community plan. On the map for Belle Meade Plaza, you said you're only taking away one entrance exit, but number 8, is that 8? Yeah. It's an right turn out. And looking at the new revised plan, it looks like that just goes into the underground parking garage. So it really isn't a true in-out.
I think Pablo probably wants to start. Yeah.
I think maybe bringing John over here to better explain the sort of how the trajectory of that. I can see how that's
But it looks
confusing.
like it only goes into that underground parking garage. So it's really not an entrance to the rest
There's
of the
connectivity
development.
within the garage,
Right.
as John was describing when he talked about the flooding. But I'll hand it to you.
Sure, I would say you're correct. It is, that's the lower part of the site. You know, as you're going west, it's falling
Right,
away. So
right.
when you come into that level, into that right in, right out, it does hit the parking garage. But then as you go into the parking garage, there's 2 or 3 places where it'll ramp back up to the surface parking. So
So you would have to go through the garage and then back up if you were going to retail.
if you were trying to park on the surface parking, yes,
Yeah.
in that entrance.
Okay. Okay. Now,
Can I say one more thing though? So it was described last time, the retail, there's limited surface level parking for the retail. And the intention is for people to park on this underground parking, in this underground parking garage, and take the elevators up right to that plaza area.
okay, that's a parking garage underneath a residential building. So will the elevators be available to the public since it's a residential building? And if I were going to shop in the retail, I wouldn't be parking in that location. I would go to one that was closer to the retail. So it seems to me like it's really an inconvenient entrance, well, a right turn entrance, right turn out. I mean, I wouldn't even be able to take that because I would be coming from the Belle Meade side. So I would have to go down to the major intersection. But I just wanted to make sure I understood the new drawing, that it does go into the garage. There is no other access to the surface parking or over to retail. Okay.
So
Now, I have one other question. I guess this would be for Tom Palco. Was that his name? Has he left?
Oh, he left.
Oh, okay.
But
Well,
if you want to go ahead, if you want to write it down.
okay. Okay. In looking at your maps and where you're showing the floodplain and floodway, I mean, it's not up here. This would be on the previous one. I can't tell, but it looks to me like part of that building A, as it was described last time, part of that will be in either the floodplain or the floodway. And in the FEMA Technical Bulletin 6-1, dated January 2021, it talks about underground parking under residential buildings. And I pulled up the FEMA flood map for Belle Meade Plaza, and it looks to me like part of building A is in what is zoned AE. And is it?
Yes, you're correct. So the floodplain, I don't know if we can go back to some of the floodplain maps, but the kind of southwestern corner of the site, I think that's what you're saying, the AE zone. And so that's the area, the actual floor of the residential is up a story from there.
Right.
But I think what we're talking about is the garage entrance, because it has to tie to
Okay.
Harding there. And that's the entrance we were talking about
Okay.
needing to floodproof.
This Technical Bulletin 6, dated January 2021, states underground parking garages are prohibited under residential buildings if it is in zone AE.
Unless they're floodproofed. And that gets back to the permitting that we send into the.
It doesn't say except, there are no exceptions. It says they are prohibited if they are in zone AE.
Well, once they're floodproofed, from their perspective, they're not in zone AE because the water cannot back up into the garage. But
Well, I mean, I have read this FEMA bulletin over and over because I am very concerned about flooding after living through the 2010 flood, as most of us did and are concerned. This area was pretty much underwater, and there were deaths very close to where that entrance exit is to that garage. That's all.
I have a real quick
Is this-
question for AJ Capital. Having represented developers for 30 years, I would like to know specifically why you cannot develop in an FAR1 under the current MUL. I suspect the answer is the land cost, but I would like you to be honest and explain to all of us why you can't do this development in an MUL with an FAR of 1. Obviously, you'd have to reduce the towers, but I'm talking about the overall general concept of the development, residential, mixed use. Is if the land cost is driving it, I think you ought to be honest with all of us because you're painted as the villain, AJ Capital, and you may not be the villain in this story.
So not to oversimplify the answer, but the land cost is expensive. Construction costs are going up. And that includes the amount of work we're going to do to create the open space, to restore the creek, to bury the parking, all these things that we continue to say we believe are great community benefits overall, but it does add significant cost to the project. So with the additional density, that helps us carry the site and horizontal development costs to make this project feasible.
I just have a few minutes? So my name is Kathy Billings, and I live at the corner of Woodlawn and Estes since 2007. And we have 3 teenage boys, and I go to Publix grocery store next to this redevelopment place probably 10 times a week. And used to shop at Hill when it was before it became Publix, the Hill grocery store there. And Kathleen, I hope everyone's taking into account, like when you if we could lower the towers and make them shorter and make less of a stressor on all the environment that this is going to impact. So when the Publix came in, you could easily go and shop. You can't go in there and get a parking spot. And they have underground parking, and it is a nightmare. I mean, any time of the day you go in that shopping center, you can't find a place. You can't hardly pull in. You can't hardly even pull out. And so I just envision this retail space, which is going to be limited parking up top anyway, for all of us to go to get our coffee or whatever, is going to turn into what the public situation is. And removing that grocery store from the Kroger and putting it back in the theater, which there was a Harris Teeter there, that was awful with the escalators and the parking in that weird parking garage. I mean, that is not a family-oriented grocery shopping experience. And now they're going to build these, maybe put in new apartments above the theater. I mean, it's just has nightmare written all over it. Plus the hotel that you're putting here. I mean, we haven't even talked about a hotel. And then the other hotel that's going to be next to St. Thomas. So, I live not even, I think it's 0.75 miles away from this. And sometimes on a good day, it'll take me 10 minutes to get there, 10 minutes to take a left at Woodlawn and Harding to come through and then sit forever again at another stoplight. And it's not just that hour in the morning, and it's not just that hour in the afternoon. I work full-time from home, and sometimes I'll scoot out at noon to go to the store, and it is just as bad as first thing in the morning and in the afternoon. So please, Kathleen, and I know you grew up here, and we had success in getting Chick-fil-A shut down years ago. Yay, that was great. And your help with the sit-in property and all that was fantastic. But, I mean, this is obviously serving one group of people. Thank you.
I have a quick question that relates to traffic. It can be very quickly answered if she has it.
Sorry, come back tomorrow.
We've got 6 more minutes. Wait, which one are you? Oh, yeah. So we have that cat, Nimbus. Yes. He used to come over and see y'all. Don't have